Hello everyone and welcome to this very exciting tutorial. Today I'm going to be showing you how you can run and get feedback from Python code inside of an Adobe extension. This will basically allow you to use all the built-in tools inside of an extension, namely Node.js, to basically launch a Python application or a Python executable, get feedback from it, understand when it's closed, and use that data then in your extension. We're going to be using this templated code that I've been using for quite some time, which simply is using the child process Node.js library to run some code. And today we're going to be getting a little help from ChatGPT to create a random Python script that does something useful, gives us information, and how we can do all of that in our extension. So before we get started, if you're excited, make sure you hit the thumbs up button, leave a comment down below if you have any ideas for future videos, and of course, hit subscribe. So to get started, we're using the extension testing code that I've always used as a template. Inside of your manifest, of course, you need to make sure you have Node.js included. If you're not familiar with how to do this, make sure you check out this video right here, which will tell you exactly how to do that. And it will also lead you down a path to learning how to use Node.js in general inside of extensions. For this example today, we don't need to install any external stuff. It's all going to work with the built-in Node.js modules that come with your extension. And then we're going to have a basic setup in our init function. So in our main.js, we're just going to have an init function that initializes some code. If we wanted to, we could just say like, hello, you just started the extension. And with that, it's going to basically launch this alert first thing when our extension launches. Then we're going to run all of this code. So let's take a quick deeper look at it before we get into the actual Python portion of it. I'll just zoom in a tiny bit here. And basically what we have going on here is we first create a variable. We're just going to call it terminal. You can call it child. You can call it whatever you want. But then we're going to set it equal to something depending on whether they're on a Mac or Windows computer. If you're on Windows, you need to use CMD or command prompt. If you're on Mac, you need to use bash, basically. So what we're going to do is require the child process built-in Node.js module, and then we're going to spawn, basically launching an instance of CMD or command line. For Mac, basically I have this getOS function that's already built into the extension testing code, but if it's Mac, we want to require the child process built-in module and then spawn an instance of the bash, or in this case, basically terminal application. Then based on just our terminal variable, which is now representative of a sort of instance of a window running command prompt or bash or terminal, we have basically a few options. We can figure out when we get any output. So if it writes something to the command line, we can get that via terminal.std or standard out. And then on data, we can then say like alert data. You can also just make sure it's to string. And then we also can get a terminal.standard error. So if any errors pop up that aren't expected output, we can also alert those as a variable and an alert here by saying on data, passing this anonymous function with the data variable will alert the data. This will basically tell you what is the output for each line that it gives, what is the output for any errors it gives, and we can also say terminal.onExit. On exit is when the application is physically closed and no longer running on the computer. So if you want, you can add an alert here that says, congrats, the Python is complete. Additionally, you could use this to then run other functions and basically don't run a function or do some action until this is finished running. Then finally, we have the actual part where we write the command line sort of for our code. I just have a variable here called t, and this is what is going to contain our eventual command. So for now, I'm just going to leave it empty with these backticks. And then we have terminal.standardin. We're going to basically write to the terminal using standardin, and we need to end it with this line break. Weird thing that I've noticed. Maybe there's a workaround, but I've noticed you've always need this plus space end line. And then finally, we're going to say terminal.standardin end, letting it know we're finished with the command. So you could technically chain commands on here if you wanted. And all this is wrapped in a set timeout for 1.5 seconds. Just to make sure that it gives it a second to execute, or gives it a second before it executes, and then we can do all of our standard out, standard error stuff. All right, so let's load ChatGPT and let's ask it for a simple Python script that is going to be something that we can do pretty easily. We could ask it to generate a random color even and just have that outputted. Obviously, there's a lot of different stuff we could do. Let's just say, give me a Python file that generates a random hex color n number of times. So let's go ahead and literally just copy and create a new file here, paste it. And here's where we're actually going to probably want to create an environment. If you're not familiar with Python at all, this might be slightly advanced, but basically sometimes you use external libraries in Python, and this requires that you create an environment to make sure that you install it in a specific location and have all the things included that you need. So the first thing I'm going to do is actually save this Python file in my extension testing. I'll create a py folder, and we'll just call this random.py. And actually, I feel like we could probably run this and get away with it. Python file. As you can see, we get a whole bunch of random color generated. And as you can see, we can get a whole bunch of random colors generated in our terminal. Change it to 5 maybe. Start debugging. As you can see, it's going to give us those random hex values. So we know the Python code itself is working. But now we need to basically put this into an executable file that we can then use the child process command to run it and then extract all of these print statements into something useful. So to do that, I need to create an environment. And to create an environment, I'm going to be using Anaconda. This is basically what you want to use whenever you want to mess around with machine learning, AI type of stuff, or just create useful Python environments that contain all the stuff you need. So all we need to do is using Conda, create a new environment given a certain version of Python as a command here. So all we need to do is give it a command to create a new environment. We're just going to call this random color. And let's use Python 3.9. I just like that number. We're going to do Conda create a new environment called random color using Python 3.9. And once we hit enter on that, it's going to create our new environment. And inside of here, we can install any external packages or libraries that are required without installing them directly to our system. If we install them to our system, we're not necessarily going to know in the future if we're running certain things whether or not those dependencies are installed correctly in the environment or executable file or on our computer itself. Basically, you want to use an environment so that you can make sure everything contains the right packages and libraries. So we'll say Conda activate. We're going to activate the one called random color. And we're also going to want to cd into our extension location. So I'll copy that location, cd into there. That way we are directly next to our random.py. And now we're going to use PyInstaller. So we're going to say pip install PyInstaller. What PyInstaller does is allows us to create a sort of package or even a single executable file based on a Python file. It allows us to also have lots of information and options for importing specific libraries or anything required like that. In our case, we don't really need it. We just need it to create the executable file. So if we look now inside of our Py folder, there's nothing except for our Python file, which generates 5 or n number of random colors. Now we've installed the environment, we've created it, we've activated it, and now we've installed PyInstaller. To create our executable, we're going to say PyInstaller, and then we need to basically give it our random.py file, say random.py. If you were in a different location, you could literally just drag it onto here and then get the full location, but I prefer to just have a working directory in this case. So PyInstaller random.py. And if we were to run this, it would actually work just fine. So that's actually not going to work super well for us because we're using a admin folder. So I'm going to just move this to my documents, cd into my documents, py. And now we're going to try the same command again, PyInstaller random.py. And now you can see we're going to start generating a build and a distribution folder. Inside of the dist folder is where all of our executable files are going to be. As you can see, we're done. We have a folder called random, and all of these libraries you can see since we're on Windows, we have a random.exe. If I run it, nothing seems to happen. But if I run it, say, in a command line where it's going to print the values, you can see we get our random colors printed out. So this is good progress. But you don't always want all of these massive files. So what we can do, we can delete it, change our command to pyinstaller random py --1 file. And in this case, it's going to create one executable file instead of having all of these extra folders and stuff, which depending on how large your application is can be super helpful. So now we have random.exe with all of the stuff packaged into one. We run it and boom, we get 5 random colors printed out. If you do this same thing on Mac, it's going to give you just a binary Unix executable file. And on Windows, of course, it's going to give you this random.exe file. So great, this is the actual file that we're now going to be running with our child process which spawned CMD or bash. What we basically need to do is run it just the way this was run here. We just simply need to give it a full path to our exe file and it's going to run it. So we can literally just copy and paste this code. We'll need to modify the type of dashes depending on your OS. In this case, this should work just fine. And we have alerts set up on everything. I think we're ready to just execute it. Hello, you just started the extension. That's good to know. And now we're getting some outputs. In this case, it gave us some random output, the path to our exe, and look, there are our random colors. Congrats, the Python is complete. So we can go and comment out the errors. I think the errors might have been what was giving us that. And then I will comment out this as well. We'll rerun this. And this particular std out, standard out, I'm not sure what it is. It always displays this as well. I think it's just general command line information. But then after that, we get, as you can see, these random colors. So how can we specifically parse out those colors? I'm going to create a variable here called colors. Just make it an empty array. And I guess since we're using extensions, let's use let. Let's have a good habit here. We're going to say if data.toString.index of hashtag does not equal -1, basically does it contain this hashtag, we probably know it's a color we want. And if it's color we want, we're going to say colors.push data.toString. I think something like that should be good. And then when we are finished, instead of saying congrats, the Python's complete, we're going to say alert our colors. Now when we run this extension, we have an error, so we need to fix that. I'm going to run it again. And if we just wait just a moment, it's going to now alert all 5 of our randomly generated colors in a JSX alert, but these are all now a variable that we can manipulate. So we could say, I don't know if this is actually in the right format. We could say colors.length, and it's probably not going to give us 5 exactly. It's going to give us 1. So the whole thing is a length of 1, which means we probably need to join it. I think based on something like that. This could be something we ask ChatGPT just real quick. Using JS, how would I join this string into an array based on the line breaks? Probably say needs to be Mac and Windows supported. Split. Oh, that's my bad. Split using this regex. Try that. Still length of 1. Honestly, I think we just have to split it based on the return carriage. Copying it as 1. Maybe not. And also, instead of using push, let's just say set it equal to data.split. And look, I don't know if it makes a difference, but maybe if we say toString, split based on that. I'm just trying to get the right colors length. It keeps giving me 1. So if I say like colors 0, I think it's still gonna give me the whole thing. Yeah, that's the whole thing. The return carriage there isn't working properly, I don't think. Oh, there we go. There we go. Okay, so toString and split as a return carriage. And now we should have a length of 5 different colors being randomly generated, or 6 in this case. It looks like we might have a line bleeding in. And you can keep going as far on this as you want. You can then modify your Python to accept arguments and use those arguments inside of here as well, and then change the number of random colors you generate, change anything inside of your Python that can be programmed basically. So that's going to do it for this video, guys. That's how you can run and set up Python code to run in an Adobe extension and also get the data back directly into your JSX. So if you want to do something externally to JSX or extensions or Adobe, you can do that and get information back. This subject goes super deep, and I've been doing this for probably 6 to 12 months now, really learning and really getting into it, making sure I understand how things work on Windows and Mac, messing around with machine learning. And this is, if you've ever seen some of my previews of cool machine learning stuff, how I've done it all. But this is the simple version and a starting off point for you guys on how to run Python code in an extension. Thanks for watching, and of course, if you enjoyed, hit subscribe and the like button, join the Discord down below, and we'll see you guys next time.